All right, with that, we're going to get started. As I mentioned, this is part of the ENFOS Expert Series. This is for consultant super users. And this, the purpose of this webinar is to show existing ENFOS users how to import proposals in bulk and import invoices in bulk. The perspective we'll be using today is that of a consultant, but this is applicable to employee users as well. This is considered an advanced webinar and does not review the basics of ENFOS usage. If you're looking for some of the basics, again, I'll show you once we log into the system where there's some other training materials. As always, working with your ENFOS administrator will be important for this process. For this webinar, we'll spend about 45 minutes on proposals and invoices, and have about 15 minutes at the end of the session for questions and answers. And of course, use that chat box. All right, so I am Torrie Behrens. I am the Director of Customer Success at ENFOS, and I'm going to be leading the webinar today. I think I know most of you, but if this is my first time speaking with you guys, welcome, and glad you were able to join the webinar today. All right, so let's get started. All right, within the GoToWebinar panel, there's a lot of sections, and one of those sections is handouts. And there are 3 handouts that you can download today as supplemental training material for the topics we're discussing. Now, these are generic documents, and there'll be slight modifications compared to your client's settings and configurations. For my admins, I've made these documents Word documents, so you can download them and edit them and then distribute them out to your users, with the additional edits or details as required for your system and your contact for importing. All right, let's start with some basics. So everyone who has access to ENFOS production also has access to ENFOS integration, and that's what I'm showing here. You can see the URL instead of p.enfos is i.enfos. And if you're using SSO, your IT team probably provided you with a production login link and also an integration login link. But this is a true sandbox. Your password is the same as your production password, assuming you haven't changed it this week. And that's because this is a copy of production as of Saturday. You can use this system to test all your import files that we're going to share today. And it's great for working through errors. But I always remind everyone, if you're using this integration system, to be sure to actually load your real data in production, because your clients are not going to receive their alerts from this integration system. For today, I'm going to start small, and I always suggest starting small. 1 proposal at 1 AOC. And once you get comfortable using the import files to load that data, that's when you can really scale up and do bulk importing. We're also going to be using CSV files. And if you're not familiar with a CSV file, it works slightly different than Excel, most notably with leading zeros and date formats. I know some of the codes for some of our clients include leading zeros, so you'll have to be extra careful. Using the apostrophe symbol is a key for getting the cell to retain leading zeros. And we'll take a look at that when we start looking at some of our CSV files. Most importantly, everything is controlled by permissions. And if you're not seeing what I'm sharing today, it may be because your user permissions need editing. So keep that in mind. You may need to make a request to your client administrator for changes of permissions. For proposal importing, it's the same permissions as what you have to add a proposal within the user interface, right through the screens. But for invoice importing, there is a unique permission. And we'll look at that a bit later when we look at invoicing. It's called Edi Transfers. We're going to start with proposals. And the import that I'm going to show today does not work for subcontractors yet, right? That's something coming soon. So that means if you're a primary vendor trying to do an import for a subcontractor, you cannot do that import. It's going to fail. Your client administrator, your client project managers, they can do that import, assuming they have that all companies permission, but chances are you won't be able to do that. But like I said, we have a ticket that's a known issue for us, and we are working on that improvement. Keep in mind the names can be customized by clients too. So I'm using the term, proposal, purchase order. You might see something different in your own system. That's, both what I am saying today during the webinar as well as in the documentation. So as I mentioned, a recording of the webinar is going to be available after today's session. And in ENFOS, when you log in, when you open a new tab by clicking the plus symbol, you're going to see all of the previous webinars, as well as standard training videos in ENFOS. And those are all listed in the tutorial videos section. These are all YouTube video links. They're all about an hour, maybe a little less, and they're available for you or any of your users for additional training material. There's a lot of really great content. I would say the most recent videos are at the bottom. Of course, we always have our help articles as well as contacting support, where you can contact your primary ENFOS administrator for additional support and additional questions. Okay, let's get into the proposal importing. I'm going to use the test system instead of the integration system, and really for me, that's just where I had built out all of my content. As I am logging in, I'm going to talk about our proposal import tool. And this is our most robust import in ENFOS. It is the same import format for all of our clients with all of their different financial settings. It's really powerful and really amazing, but because it has so much flexibility, it makes it a little tricky to use just kind of straight from the get-go. So we have a trick that we do here at ENFOS, and I want to talk to you guys about as the best way to import proposals. And what I suggest doing is find a proposal, and we're going to use a proposal that you've already created as a template to create an import file for your new proposals. So I have lots of proposals here. This is all fake filtered data. Nothing I'm looking at here is real. And I can take this proposal as my example, and I can click on the proposal ID link. Now I'm here under finance proposals. I found a proposal that I had created sometime in the past, and I'm going to click on that proposal and use it as my template. Now I know all the users are familiar with the action items dropdown in the top right, and I've selected that action items dropdown, and we have an option for export. And this export is what we're going to use to create our template. So when I click on this link, I get a pop-up box, and that allows me to select what type of format I want to export this as. I'm going to leave the selection defaulted as the ENFOS export format. This exports this data exactly in the format I need to re-import the data. So I'm going to take a look at one of those exports that I had prepared before our call today. And this has some additional highlighting, and we're going to talk about this highlighting. So my proposal, I exported a single proposal, and this proposal only had one line in it. Now, depending on your example and your proposal that you're using for your template, you may have many rows, right? And those rows may be unique by WBS combination, time and materials versus units. There's a lot of different fields which would allow you to have a multiple row proposal. But when you do the export, there's two fields that download information in these cells that you need to review and remove. And that's required to import a new proposal. One of those fields is reference, and the other field is item ID. And of course, I have this documented in those handout documents attached to this session. But removing the contents of those fields are going to be required to re-import the data. Now, Now, as this template, you're adding, editing, modifying the data to create a new proposal, right? So here's my example. Maybe my last proposal was for, 25,000, but this one I need to do for 40,000. So I make my edits. I may need to, copy existing rows and add multiple rows, maybe unique WBS combinations, to import a full proposal with a lot of details. This is where you would edit the CSV file to make the proposal you want. We talked earlier about that the cells with leading zeros and the apostrophe. So if you're new to CSV, be sure to use that apostrophe symbol to maintain leading zeros. Otherwise, if you type it in, as you can see it with I'm doing here in my row 3, it's losing that leading zero unless you use the apostrophe. So keep that in mind with both any leading zeros as well as date formats. That's where we see this. Now, combinations that make a proposal unique, because here we're looking at loading one proposal at one AOC, but you can load many proposals at the same AOC or many proposals at many AOCs in the same import. So my fields highlighted in yellow, and again, listed in my backup documentation, that's what makes the combination, of this proposal import unique. So some combination of node path, your project ID, expense type, etc. That's going to make this, this import unique. All right, if you're using Canadian or European tax, there is an important column for you, and that's tax status, right? Make sure you've got that populated. You can import both time and materials and units by using this item type. And as I mentioned, it's designed to work, with all settings and configurations. So I'm only populating phase and activity because that's what's required by this client's settings, but you may need to populate more fields. You can use the item sequence to define the order or make sub-rows, folders within sub-rows. And be sure if you're doing a primary folder, you may need to remove the dollar amount. All right, so I'm talking a lot about these formats, but you're probably wondering, how do I know? How do I find out what this format is? So I'm going to show you where we publish this format. You can download it for your client, and it downloads the exact valid values and information you need to know your client specifications on the proposal import. I'm going to go back to the proposal list to do this. And when I come to the top of this page and use the action items dropdown, there's an import button. And if you click that import button, this is where the format is displayed. So I'm going to click that. And this re-navigates me, right? It actually takes me to admin, transfers, file import. And it makes my first two selections, finance and proposal. So you could navigate there either way from the proposal page like we did, or go through the drop-down menus. I have three options up here, and if you are familiar with the import page, they work the same. But my last tab is import formats. And this import format shows us all of the details needed to import this data, right? All the valid values, all the requirements, everything we need. Now, so this gives us all the data, but of course we downloaded the template, so we have a lot of information already there. We can download the template here. This downloads the column headers, or we can download the format. That actually downloads all the details that we see on the page. This will especially answer some questions on client-specific valid values, like your WBS codes, etc. So as I mentioned, we're going to use the template. We're going to start with one proposal at a single AOC. And I've built my proposal out. I've actually built this one out with some errors. This is a single proposal with 5 rows within it. And I know that this one has an error, right? I've named it proposal import with error. And you can see my phase code is missing. So I'm going to show you what happens when you import the file with errors. So if you're on this page, the finance proposal page, you can browse to load your file. I do want to show everyone one additional area where you can load it. And if you're within still, you're within a proposal, you do have an option to import straight from that proposal page where you can browse for the file. It's actually the exact same import. It's just two different ways to load that same file. Let me come back over here and select my proposal import. All right, so we're first going to use the proposal import with errors. And we know, we talked about using integration first for testing this import. As the file processes, you can see that I get an error. It tells me all the rows and the column that I have the error and why there is an error, right? So I have that the phase field is required, and that's the error I'm getting here. So I have actually corrected that in my other import. Here we are. I've got it working. I'm going to load that file, proposal import, no errors, and now save that. This will process. And great, I got a successful notification. No rows had an error. At this point, this is where, especially as you're getting used to this, to go double check this information. So I'm going to go back to my node and look at my proposal I just imported. First thing that's important is that it loads in the editing status, right? You still need to submit this proposal. It also does not load any backup documentation. We talk about here loading proposals in bulk. We don't have a way to load documents in bulk or different documents to multiple proposals. So you guys have an idea on that, please send it over. We'd love your feedback. But because this proposal is in editing status, this gives you an opportunity to review it. You can make edits within the user interface. You can check your work to make sure it loaded exactly as you thought it would. You can load your backup documents. And the last thing you need to do, right, and I don't want anyone to forget this, is submit it, right? You submit this on to your project manager for their review and approval. Within ENFOS, we do not have a rescind feature. So that means once you submit it, there's no way to take it back from the project manager. They have to reject it for you to make edits. So again, it's a great opportunity to double check it and make sure it's correct before it goes onto your project manager. Now, everyone here is familiar with how to submit a proposal one by one, but imagine you're loading up 20 different proposals at 20 different AOCs, and you don't want to go AOC by AOC to submit each one. I want to talk to you about how to use your user preferences to submit proposals in bulk. And again, this is an advanced webinar, so I'm not trying to confuse anyone or screw up someone's user preferences. I know a lot of you set those user preferences and forget them, but within that submodule, you can edit the settings and configurations to allow you to submit proposals in bulk, and then edit those settings back to the way you have them today. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. Again, this is documented with all the steps. And we're going to talk about how to submit proposals in bulk. You could also do this for invoices. Okay, so I'm going to go to my own user account and then select preferences. You all have access to this today. And like I mentioned, I know a lot of you have set this probably at Go Live and haven't touched it since. So it's always a good opportunity to review these settings. We have some additional functionality at the bottom of the action items page to show additional rows and sort order, etc. But we're going to talk about our proposal submitting. So I'm going to select advanced filtering. You may have one of these other buttons selected. You may already have advanced filtering selected. I have some statuses already selected in my user preferences, but that's not the status of my proposal that I want to submit. So I'm actually going to remove those, right? Here's the risk. If you forget to move them back in your user preferences, tomorrow when you log in, you're not going to see those proposals you're used to seeing. So if you do edit your preferences, make sure to edit them back. We know that those proposals were imported in the task cost estimation status. I'm going to load that status into my selected statuses and click Save. And on this page, make sure always, always, always scroll to the bottom and click Save. Once you make your changes, you'll get a success notification that your preferences have been saved. So now when I open a new tab and I go to my action items page, I can see I have 5 proposals. Now, through my testing, these are all at the same node, but in theory, they could be at any node, and ENFOS knows to show them because I am listed as a contact. So now what I can do is use my checkbox in the first column, and this is my bulk action checkbox. So once I have my proposals selected, I can select my bulk actions box and click the submit button and click continue. And this is going to submit my proposals in bulk to my project manager. Right, so it gives you a great way to load proposals in bulk. You can review them and do your documents one by one. And then finally, you can submit those proposals in bulk to your project manager. So it's going to make your work faster and quicker, especially once you get used to the import format. Okay, so now that we've spoken about proposals, we're going to talk about importing invoices in bulk. And I know some clients, are using the invoice import with EDI very successfully and in their day-to-day process. But I wanted to show this import and the functionality here. Now, as I mentioned, this has a unique user permission, and that is what I have highlighted on my screen, Edi Transfer. And if you do not have this permission, you will not be able to import your EDI, electronic data invoicing file. So you may need to send a request over to your client administrator requesting access to this permission. This page is located under transfers, and then the first option there, Edi Transfer. Again, you're only going to see that with the permissions. On this page, you're going to see a lot of information. You may see your transfer mode as EDI or your client's name, EDI. When you use the drop-down menu, you're also going to see a test EDI. And what's really cool about this page, unlike our proposal import, we actually have a test transfer mode. So you can test this file in your production system as long as you make that test selection. So it's really valuable. We really like this feature. So be sure to use this test before you start importing your EDIs, just so you know it's, the file works fully successfully. All right, the file format. The file format has a button here on the right side of the page that when you click it to view file format, this shows you the file format. Now this EDI may be different for some clients. So I would always double check, especially if you're a consultant that is using ENFOS for multiple clients. Double check the format, double check those valid values. The valid values will absolutely be different for different clients. But here we have our import format. You can see we don't have a download template on this page. So, you could maybe have a template from our client administrators. Maybe you have a template built out that you can share with your users. Maybe there's previously imported files that you could download and use as a template. Or you can do it the slow way and copy it in, paste it into Excel, and then copy and use your column names to have your template for the first time Now, I did that and I actually have my template built out here. We do not have a download template as we did with our proposal. Here we are just kind of building this one out from scratch. All righty. I'm going to expand these columns.
One of the questions was, can you explain what an AOC is? So I think it might be for some consultants that have their customers naming them something different.
Okay, Roger is here and brought a note to my attention to explain what an AOC is. And again, this is ENFOS generic terminology. An AOC is the lowest level in your hierarchy where you do your project financials. AOC stands for Area of Concern. It may be called a project for you. It may be called an environmental matter, an opportunity. There's lots of different names that our clients use to call that lowest level. Generically in ENFOS, AOC. So thank you for whoever brought up that question. Roger, thanks for stopping me on that one. Okay, so invoice. We've got our column headers here. It's a CSV file again. I know, right? Looking at this right now, I know that's going to fail. Adding in those apostrophes for the leading zeros and my date format is going to save me an error that I know is coming. There's not a lot of required fields here, right? You've got your purchase order number, proposal number, vendor number, your invoice number. Everyone knows that has to be unique by vendor. You've got your invoice date and your invoice amount. Again, now this can be unique rows for your WVS combination. And that might have that line amount different if there's multiple rows. You might have your tax information as a unique row. You might have unit information. You might have to change your currency. You might be doing an invoice or a credit memo, right? So the fields here are pretty straightforward. Again, it's designed to work how your invoice import works within the user interface. If we have anyone on the call that uses preliminary invoice, we have an EDI in testing right now for that preliminary invoice process. So that's something coming down the line. All right. All right, so we are going to import our invoice, right? It's pretty straightforward, just having our rows here. I'm going to select my EDI import, select my file, and import this data. Now, again, you can load multiple invoices up at the same time. This file actually processes some work, some don't. And I actually got an error. So I'm going to click on that error link to see the details of my error. And look at this, my invoice number already exists. I'm putting 2 and 2 together, and as I was practicing earlier today, I already used this invoice number, right? So ENFOS properly gave me an error message, and this one was not created. So the error message is really straightforward on why there is an error. What I do is I go back to my file. Again, knowing how CSV files work, what I do is I leave this file open because then I do not have to go back in and add those apostrophes to any cells with leading zeros. So I changed my invoice number. I'm going to save my file. Let's do this again. Excellent. I get a success notification that my file processed successfully without errors. That's exactly what I want to see. Now, just as with proposal, I want to go look at that invoice. Let me pull my invoice number here. Here's my invoice. It's in the reviewing status. So this one is in ENFOS. It's in the reviewing status. So it's sent right onto my project manager. I can load in my backup documentation here. And I know, for most of our clients and most of their settings, that backup document is required. So you definitely want to make sure that gets loaded in there. Now on our EDI page, we have a bit of information. I think this is very important information. And I want to make sure everyone on the call knows about this. And this is, you can load your EDI through the user interface, just as I showed you today. But you can also email it in. And on this page in ENFOS, it gives you the instructions on how to email in your import file. So now you don't even have to log into ENFOS. Details are going to be a little different in production, as well as, the details here would change based off of your client. But to email, here's this where you email the file to. It has a specific subject line, and then you add your document. An attachment is your import file. Now you must be a user, right? That email address as the sender has to be an active user in ENFOS for this to work. If that sender is not an active user, ENFOS is just going to ignore it as if it's spam, right? But if you are an active user, then we will process the file and you'll get your information. Okay, so that's importing in our invoices. You can also, use your user preferences on your invoices to talk about, to see your invoices on your action items page. All right, with the remaining time for the call, I want to talk about bulk reporting and scheduling reports to run automatically and get emailed to you. Now, again, this is a unique permission. And I'm going to look at my user permissions. I'm going to look at my user permissions. Here we go. Report scheduling is this permission. And if you don't have this permission, you cannot schedule reports to run automatically. So if you're not seeing what I'm seeing, this is the permission you would need to request from your ENFOS administrators to do this. And once you have that permission, you're going to see under reporting an option called scheduler. But we're not going to start there. We're actually going to start under run report. And I'm going to run a scenario that, I think a lot of the consultants on the call would want for a scheduled automated report. And our scenario is going to be invoices paid last month, right? We want to know all of our invoices that have been paid. We're going to schedule this in ENFOS to be sent to us and whoever else we define, ENFOS user or not an ENFOS user. And we're going to set it up on a recurring basis. So I want this report for all my nodes, every node that I have access to. And I know that this report is under finance invoice. Now, this is just an example. You can schedule any report you want in ENFOS. So my example, paid invoices last month, but you could set up anything you want. All right, because everyone here has probably sat in on the reporting webinar, everyone is already familiar with the customization, report criteria, and the report outputs. But I'm going to talk briefly about the customization right now. I'm going to add in a report criteria. I'm going to do two important things for payment information. I need to toggle my proposal details to no. And I see this little hash mark indicator, and when I go to the bottom of the page, it tells me paid amount is only shown when proposal details are not included. So I know that, right? And now you guys know that. So proposal details, no. And I'm going to set WBS level details to none. Now I want to define my payment information, right? So we have these relative date ranges. So instead of defining my date criteria, I can say anything paid last month. Maybe you want to see it this quarter, this week, etc., right? You define how you want this report output last month. And then I will click add. And I have to give it a name. My invoices paid last month. If you're an employee user, you may want to define your vendor company on that page, right? If you're a vendor user, you're probably already, defined as that user. Okay, so my invoices paid last month. Report customization, just a quick note here. You can use this to define the columns and the orders, right? So this invoice report, it's a huge, awesome report, but there's a ton of columns in it, and you might not want all that. You might just really want like invoice number, invoice date, paid amount, right? Something really simple. So you can use the selection boxes. and reorder these columns any way you want. So once you have your report set up, I always suggest running it in screen first, right? I can run this report in a new tab and confirm that I'm getting the outputs I'm expecting. Once I confirm that that output is good, in the new tab or even on this page, I can save it as a favorite with my Save to Favorites button. I have to give it a name, right? This is just for me. So what is the report name that I am going to give it? My invoices paid last month, right? And there we go. My report's been saved as a favorite. So this report scheduling is a two-step process. The first step you have to do is save a report as a favorite. Any report, you have to give it a name, right? Define your criteria, customization if you want, but save it as a favorite. Once it's saved as a favorite, this is when you can go to the tab here, Scheduler. All right, the top section is my scheduled jobs section. And I can click the button over here on the right that says Create New Job. Again, there's a couple required fields, right? Job name, my invoices paid last month. I can give it a description, optional. I can choose if I want to share this. Typically, I hear that, set the share to no. You can always edit it, but typically I hear from our admins, keep that at no. Then you can schedule this job. We want this job to be scheduled, and we want this job to repeat, right? We want it to repeat every month. Our start date is really cool. This is kind of how you define when you're going to get that report. So maybe I want to get mine on the 1st of the month. So I want this first report to run February 1st, and I can define if I have an end date, right? If you say no end date, it's going to keep running every month until you turn it off. But I don't really want that. So I'm going to turn mine off on February 2nd. You have to define who the report is delivered to, right? It's delivered to myself, but you can also type in other people here, right? And these do not have to be ENFOS users. These can be whoever, but it has, keep in mind, you're just sending an Excel report output. This is especially important for my employee users on the call, our client users. If you're running a vendor invoice report for all your vendors, it's going to have all of those in the report. So you wouldn't want to share that full report out probably with each one of your vendors from all the companies. You might want to have a filtered list. So just keep in mind, whatever you're sending out will go out to all these users. So you have multiple people listed in the output. And I can also use this do not send report if blank. This is a really cool feature. It basically works like a custom alert. And if I have it set to yes, what it says is if I don't have any paid invoices last month, then this report won't send. So it's really cool. You can imagine, if you're trying to set this up as a custom alert, it gives you a lot of functionality. But maybe you want to know that this report runs every month, whether there's data in it or not. That's when you would use no. You can define your file output type, Excel or CSV, and you can choose if you want to zip it or add the date and time to the file name. Within your reports, now this last step, this is where you define your reports. And you click the Add button over here on the right, and these are your favorited reports. There's my invoices paid last month. So I select that report and I click Done. Now this is ready to go, but what some of you may have realized on that page, when I clicked Add, it's not a radio button, but it's a checkbox. So I can actually have multiple tabs in my report outputs, right? Each tab would be a unique report favorite. So now you can build out full report output workbooks from ENFOS with all of the data you need in different tabs. It's really, really, really powerful. The last step, of course, you click Save. Now this report is saved. It's under Scheduler. At any point, I can run this report right now, and it's going to run the report, and I can get my output. So I don't even have to wait until my next scheduled report to get my data if I don't want to. So even there, I'm, increasing efficiency, because now instead of making those 3 or 4 selections on my run reports page to find my report, I can just come to this page and click run. When this report does run, in the bottom section, we have a job status. And this just lets you know the status of the jobs that have been scheduled to run. So if you think, maybe I didn't get this report output, you can see here out of ENFOS if we sent it. And then you know that you might need to check in your spam filters or your, internally blocked spam filters for this report output. But what I've found, for most of our clients, if you're getting those standard email alert notifications from ENFOS, you're going to get this scheduled job. I do know that these reports typically run in the middle of the night Pacific time. So when you log in to your email inbox in the morning, you're going to have an email report from ENFOS with an attachment, and that attachment will have all your report data. So it's a great way to use ENFOS's reporting to send you data without having to ever log into the system. Okay, before we go over to questions, I had just a few notes that I wanted to talk about with the future enhancements that we talked about today. One thing is the proposal importing for subcontractors. Right now, that's not available. So if you're a primary vendor with a subcontractor, you cannot use the proposal import to import proposals for that sub vendor. We know this, we're working on it, and we'll get there. Another item we're working on is the EDI importing for preliminary invoicing. And I only know one client that's using the preliminary invoicing at this time. So that one client, that item is actually in testing and will be available very shortly. Otherwise, as you use the proposal importing and the invoice importing and the report scheduler, be sure to contact your client administrators with any questions or feedback. We love hearing the feedback. Okay, we are going to move to the questions. If you have not already submitted a question, now's the time.
Okay, I will. This is Roger. I'm going to read the questions, and Torrie, you get to answer them.
Okay.
First question, on the proposal import, what happens if we list the wrong project manager for the customer?
Great question. So if you list the wrong project manager in the proposal import, let me show you. Here I am. What's great about the proposal import is it goes in the editing status. So you can, when you review your proposal, you can see in the contact section who you listed in that import. And if it's the wrong person, just as you do in the user interface, you use the checkbox, you delete that person. Well, I've got to add somebody better. Let's add in Roger. There's Roger. And now it'll let me delete Torrie. There we go. So I've corrected my contact. Now, if you submit it to the wrong contact, there's no rescind on that. What you should do is contact that wrong project manager, let them know you accidentally sent a proposal to them, and they can reject it. Now, for my employee users or my admins, you can always, any of your users can always navigate to that site and see all of the items. So even if the wrong project manager is listed, they're not going to get the email notifications, they're not going to see it on their action items, but they can always navigate to, their AOC here, 2887, and review it from this page.
Okay, this is kind of part 2 and some additional commentary on that same question. So the consultant user downloaded an existing proposal and used that as their template, and they forgot to change the project manager. So it went to the wrong customer project manager. The wrong customer project manager actually approved it. It became a purchase order, and now all the invoices are going to the wrong project manager. And the submitter of this question said that this was actually corrected by doing an update, a bulk update.
So great point. If you download a template, be sure to review that owner contact and update that contact information there. If right, in this scenario, the wrong project manager reviewed and approved it, and now you've got your purchase order with the wrong contact, when you create your invoice, you actually do have a way to review those contacts and edit those contacts, but that's one by one, and you've got to remember it. What you can do is you can contact your admin, and they have a tool, an update tool, where they can replace the contacts on their proposal. And they can actually do kind of like a search and replace for that purchase order. So there is a way to change it. But the better option, of course, make sure you've got it right the first time around.
Okay. The next question is, who is going to win the Super Bowl?
Oh, geez. Well, our company is headquartered in San Mateo, California. So I guess we are rooting for San Francisco.
Good answer.
Yeah.
All right. Next
Sorry,
question.
Kansas City fans.
What is the benefit of emailing the invoice to doc.p or at Infos? Does someone from Infos then do the loading and troubleshooting?
Okay. What's the benefit of using this email address? Infos automatically picks this up every 10 minutes, right? We have a server that does this. No one is opening your file or processing this. It basically goes to a box where it gets automatically processed. The benefit is you don't have to log into Infos to load the file yourself. I like to be in the user interface because then I get an immediate response if there's errors. You saw how quickly I was able to see that error that I had already used my invoice number and fix it immediately. Whereas if you're emailing, you might have to wait 10 minutes before you get that notification back. So, either method works. It doesn't matter to us.
Okay, next question. As a consultant, we have our own internal cost estimating and invoicing system.
Yeah.
Can our systems be programmed to send these files directly to Infos?
Yeah, absolutely. Using the formats and the valid values that we have published here, your system teams can build your exports to match the Infos import requirements. Now, keep in mind, and I know actually a lot of our clients had updated some valid values at the end of the year. Keep in mind, these valid values can be changed at any time. So what may have worked last year might not work this year moving forward. So if you do have a automated system where you can create the Infos export, that's awesome. But periodically double check the valid values that they're still updated and current.
Okay. Let's see, we got at least two more here. What do I do if I have an uploaded invoice that needs rejected or deleted?
Yes. Infos does not have a rescind feature. So what you need to do is contact your project manager and ask them to reject that invoice. Once the invoice is rejected, then you would be able to make edits to that invoice and resubmit it onto them.
And then the second part was to have it deleted.
Okay, so deleted, I would say contact your client administrators, because I know some administrators, if an invoice is rejected, they want to keep that in there to know that information. They don't necessarily want it deleted. Whereas, maybe if you had a typo or it was a coding error, you might just delete it. But once an invoice is rejected, you would have an option to delete it within Infos. Your client administrators always do have a little bit more functionality and access there to delete invoices in various statuses.
Okay. The other thing, I believe that if the user from the consulting company has created an invoice, but they haven't submitted it yet, so they did it through the user interface and they haven't submitted it yet, they probably can delete it if it hasn't been submitted yet.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, once it's submitted and in that reviewing status, that's when
it cannot be deleted.
Exactly.
Right. By the end user.
Yep.
Okay. Question, where do I find the recording of this and other trainings?
Yeah, anytime you're in Infos, you can use the new tab button. And that new tab button will open to the tutorial video section. And this shows all of the historic videos. Eventually, we're going to get this one in. It's probably going to be within our winter release. If you need it earlier, you can have your admin contact Infos, and we can provide a link probably in the next couple of weeks. That information can also always be accessed by the information tab under your user account. And then be sure within this webinar to download the handout documents.
Okay, questions are still coming, which is great. For EDI invoicing,
Yeah.
is there a test mode before I actually want to submit them?
Yes. We come back to the EDI transfer page. Under the transfer mode, you're going to see a test option. And that test option allows you to import this file as a test. You can also use integration, right? Integration allows you to test any of the files to really make sure all your valid values are correct, to make sure it's going to import successfully and perfectly and work great the first time.
Okay. For EDI entered invoices, are they always loaded in the submit status? I think the question is, what status do they go into once they're imported successfully?
They're imported in the reviewing status.
Okay. So they always would be in the reviewing status?
Yeah.
But the consultant can still go into it to add the backup documents?
They can. That's right.
Right. Okay. Is there any way to upload the backup documents via email?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So there is ways to upload backup documents via email. And in our document management training video, we talk about this. There is also a supplemental training handout that I know some of our admins have on how to email documents into ENFOS. Now that's invoice by invoice, because part of the subject line requirement is you define the invoice number. Personally, I think it's faster to log into ENFOS, go to your invoice, and drag and drop that backup document file right there. But you can email documents into ENFOS.
Okay. The error messages when uploading our EDI invoices are not always clear to understand what needs to be fixed. Is there a valid value reference that explains possible errors and what the messages might mean?
Yeah, you know, we don't have like a key on the error messages, but I would say using this view file format button, this is going to show you the valid values for your client, right? So here I'm looking at the phase code valid values. If I put in phase code 100, I'm going to get an error, right? I can see the date format listed here. And I know if my date format doesn't match, I'm going to get an error. So this format is going to help you. If you follow this format, I know you're going to have minimal errors. And I also tried to talk today about some of the more common errors that we see.
On the uploads, can I have multiple customer PMs?
Yes, absolutely. On your imports, you can absolutely have multiple customer project managers listed. Now, within a single item, you can have multiple, a single proposal or invoice, right? Because within the user interface, you can have multiple, but that's kind of bad practice. And typically, you only want to add one owner contact, and then that person adds in their next owner contact, right? Because that follows the next approver workflow. So typically, we only see one per proposal. But you may have proposals, right, at different AOCs or projects, and each one of those projects has a different project manager, owner project manager, right? So I might have my proposal 1 goes to Torrie, but then my proposal 2, right, goes to Roger. And that can all be within the same import file.
If it does have to go to 2 different people, is that a comma separated cell?
That's a good question.
Okay.
I don't know for sure. I think it would be comma separated. Let's see if the format shows us right now.
We may have to get back to everyone on that question. It's not a standard practice that we see.
Right.
Because ENFOS will automatically pick up your first contact's next approver during the workflow after they pre-approve it.
You know, nothing in the format says that it's comma separated. So okay. I would say just add one. If you do have to add multiple, again, that's not a practice we recommend. I would do it in the user interface.
Okay. And that was the last of the questions.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for the great questions and your time today. Hope you found this valuable. If you have any additional questions or feedback, of course, send that over as always. And thank you. Have a great day.